Aiden Miller's ghost costume flapped in the breeze as he skipped down the sidewalk, his pillowcase, heavy with candy, dragging behind. As was typical for a 10-year-old, he loved nothing in the world more than his family, friends, and sugar. He was the kind of kid that didn't dare touch a single vegetable, the kind who had always asked for dessert after every meal he finished, and also the kind who would do just about anything to have something sweet to bite. Aiden lived for Halloween. On Christmas Day, he unwrapped his presents wearing not festive pajamas, but a zombie's rags. On Spirit Day, he wore his school colors beneath a vampire cape, and by September, he was loading pumpkins into his mother's shopping cart, despite her assurances that they would not last a month. It was Halloween at last, and Aiden walked beneath the waxen light of a moon half hidden by shifting clouds. Aiden wanted to make sure he would get a lot of candy, but this year it was different. He wanted chocolate, his favorite. Most of the houses had past candy that wasn't chocolate, so he skipped them. He was almost at the end of the street, and yet he knew everyone there wasn't passing out what he wanted. Aiden was going to the last house on the block, but something was off about it. He didn't recognize this house, probably because nobody lived in it. Nobody would live in a rundown house, especially if the windows were shattered and broken out, the roof almost on the verge of collapsing, and the planks of the exterior of the house were missing. And that's what Aiden was looking at. Disappointment to see no candy nor anyone in general. He went to walk over to the next street, but he stopped to hear a loud slam. Aiden turned his head to the house, noticing something on the front step. Whatever it was, he was intrigued to see something out of the ordinary. Maybe someone does live there, he thought. Walking over to examine what was sitting on the step, he felt unnerved by the whole presence that appeared in front of him. The fearful feeling in him now faded into surprise to see a bowl of what appeared to be candy. And not just any candy, but chocolate bars of all kinds. Looking in to see Hershey's, Reese's Pieces, Snickers, Twix bars, Kit Kat bars, and many more he recognized. Sitting on top of the stack, which was filled up to the brim with chocolate bars, was a note, folded in half to hide whatever could be on it. Aiden picked it up with his free hand, opening it up to see two words, appearing to have been written in perfect calligraphy. Almost unable to read it, but he was able to read out what it might have said. Help yourself. Aiden obliged, tossing the note aside and scooping one handful, and then two into the pillowcase. His stomach rumbled and he emptied the bowl. His pillowcase was so heavy it required two hands to lift over his shoulder. He replaced the bowl and retreated from the house, whose cobwebs were not a decoration but a permanent fixture. He lumbered home, the weight of his prize reassuringly pressed against the small of his back. The night of trick-or-treating has ended, and Aiden had an entire feast all to himself. He sat on the couch in the living room, digging into the pillowcase to start eating. That is until his mother walked in, noticing he'd returned home. Wow, Aiden! Did you take every chocolate bar in the world? His mother jokes. Amazed by his enormous pile of candy that sat next to him, Aiden pulled back his ghost costume, looking up at his mother with a freckled grin. Must have went to every house in the neighborhood. I'm a chocolate millionaire, Aiden said, picking out a Snickers bar. Now, I don't want you eating all that candy before bedtime. I don't want you to get sick. His mother left the living room, leaving Aiden by himself. He started unwrapping the chocolate bar and put it into his mouth, enjoying the rich and creamy taste of peanuts, the chocolate coating, and the layer of caramel. As he gulped and chewed remains down, he continued to eat more of his candy. Aiden was on his fifth candy bar, a Twix, one of his favorite chocolate bars. He unwrapped the shiny plastic that covered the candy bar and popped it into his mouth. The moment he chomped down on his first bite, he stopped and screamed in pain. The next moment after that, Aiden's parents immediately ran into the living room and were petrified by what they were seeing. His mother and father dragged him out of the house and drove him to the hospital. The whole way there was the most upsetting and terrifying experience for everyone in the car. It only took the doctors a few hours to fix Aiden up. his mouth still aching with pain from the sharp objects that were punctured into his gums. Apparently, the Twix bar he had bit into was filled with bits of sharp needles and razor blades, and it was a hard job to find all the pieces that were either sticking out or buried deep into his bleeding gums. While his parents sat in the waiting room at the time, impatient with how long it was taking for the doctors to patch Aiden up, one of the doctors was finishing up the job by stitching up all the small cuts. As the job was a success, but with some of the pain still there, the doctor removed her latex gloves and threw them away in a nearby trash can. "Do you feel better now, sweetie?" the doctor said, a small, comforting smile appearing on her face as she tried to talk to Aiden, who was still touching the stitches with the tip of his tongue. "Now don't mess up the stitches, or you'll hurt your gums more." But I want them to hurt more," Aiden responded, leaving the doctor slightly confused. "Heh, you must be joking, right? I'm sure you wouldn't really want that," the doctor chuckled, hoping it was just a dark joke from a child, which was sometimes normal for someone that young to say such things like that. No, I'm not. I enjoyed the pain. I want more of it." Her eyes widened. No words to let out. All she could do was look at the strange child in front of her. "What? I want more pain. I love it. I want more." The doctor immediately ran out of her office, shocked to hear all those things Aiden was saying. Surely it all must have been a joke, right? But something about it seemed quite off for her. She walked into the waiting room to get his parents and led them into the office with her. The doctor and worried parents had a conversation not only about the operation, which it turned out Aiden will be fine as long as he doesn't mess with the stitches, and that there was nothing wrong with the bits of razor and needles, but about Aiden's behavior. She also suggested to them that they make sure that there wasn't any more sharp objects in his collection of candy. The parents took Aiden and left the hospital, and they were able to dispose of all of Aiden's candy in the trash, talking with him about how he shouldn't go trick-or-treating anymore, and about his behavior at the hospital, with Aiden passing it off as a funny joke, but they sent him to bed right after. Aiden woke up a few hours later. It was still dark and silent outside, except for some soft cricket chirps, and he felt his stomach rumble in hunger. He wanted to crave some more of the excruciating pain, a weird feeling no sane person would want. Getting out of bed, he slowly and quietly sneaked out of his bedroom and into the kitchen, looking for what he needed. He knew for a fact that his parents only threw the candy away in the trash, but never took the bag out of the dumpster, so he went to the trash can and dug out some handfuls of candy bars. Aiden started drooling, unwrapping the candy bar in rapid motion, popping it into his mouth. And as he started chewing, he noticed something different about this one. There was no sharp objects in it. And for some reason, it tasted awful to him. But what made the other ones better to him was it the sharp pain that stung the insides of his mouth that he liked? Was it the taste of the coppery, red blood that traveled down his throat? Aiden spat out the chocolate bar into the aluminum floor, then unwrapped another chocolate bar. This time, he pulled it apart in half, noticing a few needles sticking out of both pieces. He was about to start eating them, but he stopped because he heard a creak behind him. When Aiden turned around, he noticed a dark figure in the kitchen with him. He couldn't make out who or what it was, but he knew for sure that it wasn't his mother or father. The tall figure walked closer to him, stepping out of the darkness to reveal himself as a man in a black suit and rimmed hat. But Aiden couldn't see his face much. All he was able to make out was his wide smile. But there was something about that smile that seemed off to him. Each tooth in his smile had different colors of each one. There were stripes of yellow, then orange, and then the last color, white. His teeth were made out of candy corn.
"I see you're enjoying my treat,"
the mysterious man said, bending down to face Aiden. His voice was dull and low, chilling enough to make poor little Aiden's little hairs raise up on the back of his neck.
Go ahead. Take a bite. You know you want to,
the man said. Then Aiden started unwrapping each candy bar and shoving it all into his mouth. He opened his mouth at times when chewing, feeling bits of needles and razors stick into his gums and the insides of his mouth. Blood started dripping down his chin and onto the floor.
Very good, my boy. Very well done.
Aiden looked up at the tall man after finishing his nightly feast. He wanted more. Mister, is there any more left? Aiden asked, barely gurgling from the blood in his mouth. The man only laughed softly, then loudly, possibly loud enough to shake the whole house and wake Aiden's parents up. But then he bent down to face him directly into his eyes. Only except Aiden could see his eyes were pale jawbreakers. It seemed as if this man was made out of candy. His teeth were candy corn and his eyes were unbreakable but flavorful jawbreakers, and possibly his whole body too. Aiden wasn't sure how to feel about it. He was scared out of his wits, indeed, but at the same time, he felt an urge of hunger and pain.
Well, boy, why don't you put on the ghost costume and come trick-or-treating with me?
The Candyman asked, his breath giving off a cotton candy scent as he spoke.
Halloween may be over, but the night isn't.
And so little Aiden quietly went into his bedroom and put on his blanket sheet ghost costume and grabbed his pillowcase to take with him. After that, the Candyman grabbed a hold of his hand and walked out of the house into the quiet streets to have some fun. His parents hadn't woken up from the commotion and were unaware of their child's disappearance. Little did they know what might happen to their son the next morning. The Candyman and Aiden went into each house on the block looking for sharp objects for the boy to ingest. Going into one of the houses, Aiden walked into the kitchen to look through the cabinets, figuring out what to eat, and his stomach started to rumble. He pulled out a porcelain plate and smashed it into pieces on the counter and started picking them up. He pulled up his ghost costume holding a small shard of glass over his mouth and released it, gulping it down in a painful yet satisfying swallow. He could feel the sharp edges of the glass shard cutting down his throat as he swallowed it. The loud, smashing sound had woken someone up because he and the Candyman heard footsteps coming down the steps. An adult man in his nightshirt and underwear walked into the kitchen, noticing the commotion coming from the child in the ghost costume. "Who are you?" the adult shouted at him, holding a wooden baseball bat in his hand. "What the hell are you doing in my house?" The man didn't seem to notice the Candyman in the kitchen with him. Just Aiden with the mess he had made. It was as if he couldn't see him, even though the lights were on, as if he wasn't there at all. "Get out of my house or you'll get yourself into some serious trouble," the man shouted again, raising his bat towards Aiden. The boy only stood still in fear, his eyes only focused on the weapon in the man's hands. The man charged over to Aiden, swinging his bat around as the intruder attempted to dodge every swing that came toward him. The Candyman sat on the counter, watching the cat and mouse game take place in the kitchen of a stranger's house. But it was a good thing Aiden was a fast kid. Despite his diet in sugar and now sharp objects, was able to outrun him through the house. Eventually, the Candyman hopped off the counter and stuck his leg out, tripping the man, and he tumbled toward and landed headfirst into a coffee table, instantly knocking the man out. A thin cut appears on his forehead. Some blood starts oozing out. Aiden stopped and looked down at the man.
Don't worry. He's not dead. Yet.
The Candyman said before kneeling down and biting down into his neck. Blood starts spurting everywhere. Even on Aiden's blanket sheet, the man's body twitches as he tears into his flesh, chomping down on it. A few minutes later, most of his dead body now partially eaten, the Candyman got up and wiped his mouth with his jacket sleeve, and then Aiden started vomiting through his costume. mostly blood chunks, bits of chocolate, and some of the sharp objects on his ghost costume was a long trail down of blood and vomit.
Now he is. Boy, go finish up your treat.
Aiden nodded and walked into the kitchen to finish eating some of the leftover shards of glass. And after he finished, the Candyman took him to more houses to eat some more sharp objects, including nails, sewing needles, glass shards, and even attempted to swallow a whole kitchen knife, which had cut through his throat deep enough for him to be unable to physically eat anything else. He started choking on the knife since it didn't go down his throat all the way, which was also filled with more of his blood. His hands started clawing into his neck, the pain now unbearable to him. The Candyman grinned at him as Aiden struggled to breathe. He was now very close to a painful death. Aiden fell over and didn't move a muscle right after. And after that, the next morning, the sun had risen and the boy's parents had woken up. Mr. Miller got out of bed, walking into the hallway and into Aiden's bedroom door. He knocked lightly on the door, waiting for a response. He didn't hear anything, so he knocked again. "Aiden, are you alright in there?" Mr. Miller asked, chuckling nervously, knocking again. He didn't hear anything. He opened the bedroom door, only to see Aiden in his ghost costume, lying down on the floor, completely motionless. "Aiden? Aiden, are you okay?" Mr. Miller crouched down and tapped him, but he didn't respond. He pulled back the sheet and started screaming. His wife came up from behind, noticing Aiden's dead body on the floor. Loud screams and ambulance sirens had filled the quiet neighborhood. The bodies of a child and an adult had been found. It was a strange mystery. Mostly it was kids had been found with sharp objects inside their bodies, often once or twice a year around Halloween. Somewhere in the neighborhood, there was an old run-down house where the Candyman lived, and he's waiting for next Halloween to have his next victim to take some of his delicious and savory candy to make their Halloween a fun night.